Battle of Britain. The Battle of Britain began on July 10, 1940. It was a major air battle between Nazi Germany's Air Force, the Luftwaffe, and Britain's Royal Air Force. After Germany had quickly taken over much of Western Europe, Britain was the only major country left standing against the Nazis. To invade Britain, Germany first needed to control the skies. The Luftwaffe sent around 2,550 aircraft, while the RAF had only about 750 fighter planes and 2,900 pilots. These pilots weren't just British. Many of them came from Commonwealth countries and nations that had already been taken over by Germany. One big advantage for the RAF was the dowding system. It combined radar technology, ground defenses, and a strong communication network to spot and stop enemy planes early. At first, German forces focused on attacking British ships and radar stations along the coast. But by mid-August, they shifted their focus to the RAF airfields, causing serious damage. August 31st turned out to be one of the worst days for the RAF, with heavy losses. Still, the Germans thought they had done more damage than they actually had. Thinking the RAF was nearly beaten, they changed tactics and began bombing London on September 7th. This was the start of what's now known as the Blitz. That switch in strategy was a big mistake. It gave the RAF time to recover and get organized again. Then came September 15th, when the Germans launched a huge air attack, and the RAF successfully pushed them back. That day is seen as a turning point in the battle. By the end of October, Germany gave up its invasion plans. The battle came at a high cost. Over 23,000 British civilians died, and many cities were heavily damaged. The Luftwaffe lost around 1,700 aircraft, while the RAF lost about 1,000. After the battle, experts looked closely at what helped the British hold out. One key factor was the smart use of radar and a well-coordinated defense system. Historian Richard Overy pointed out how important Britain's technology and organizations were. But others, like Hubert Raymond Allen, believe that the Royal Navy also played a big role in stopping a German invasion. He argued that once the Luftwaffe started bombing cities instead of military targets, it showed they had failed to defeat the RAF. Operation Linebacker II. On December 18, 1972, the United States started a major bombing campaign against North Vietnam called Operation Linebacker II. The goal was to pressure North Vietnam to return to peace talks, which had broken down after South Vietnam rejected the terms. For 11 days, except for a break on Christmas Day, U.S. forces carried out heavy bombing raids on important military and industrial targets in Hanoi and Haiphong. The operation involved over 200 B-52 bombers, along with support from other U.S. Air Force and Navy planes. At first, the U.S. used predictable flight paths and relied heavily on electronic systems to block enemy defenses. But these tactics didn't work well. North Vietnam had strong air defenses, and they shot down 15 B-52 bombers and 11 other aircraft. Many American crew members were either killed or captured. In response, the U.S. quickly changed its strategy. They started using different flight routes and improved their attacks on enemy air defenses. These changes helped reduce loss in later missions. During the campaign, more than 20,000 tons of bombs were dropped, destroying military bases, factories, and power plants. But there were also heavy civilian losses. Reports say over 1,600 people died in Hanoi and Haiphong. The bombings caused serious damage and weakened North Vietnam's ability to keep fighting. Soon after, peace talks resumed. On January 27, 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed, leading to a ceasefire and eventually the withdrawal of U.S. forces in Vietnam. Battle of the Philippine Sea. The Battle of the Philippine Sea began on June 19, 1944, between the United States and Japan near the Mariana Islands in the Pacific Ocean. This battle was part of the U.S. plan to take control of the Marianas so they could use them as bases to launch attacks on Japan. Japan wanted to stop the U.S. from moving forward and tried to win a big sea battle to turn things around. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, led by Admiral Raymond Spruance, had 15 aircraft carriers and about 900 planes. On the other side, the Japanese First Mobile Fleet, under Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, had 9 carriers with around 450 planes. The battle got intense, as Japan sent wave after wave of planes to attack the American fleet. But the US had better radar systems and more experienced pilots, which made a huge difference. In just 2 days, Japan lost around 600 planes and 3 aircraft carriers, while the US lost about 123 planes and no ships. Because the Japanese losses were so extreme, people later nicknamed it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. American submarines also helped a lot by sinking 2 Japanese carriers, including their main flagship, the Taihyo. After the battle, Japan's ability to fight the carrier-based planes was basically destroyed, and they never really recovered from it. Experts say the US won because of their better trained pilots, smart use of radar, and good intelligence work that gave them the upper hand. Battle of Kursk. The Battle of Kursk began on July 5, 1943, between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union near the city of Kursk in Russia. Germany had launched a plan called Operation Citadel. Their goal was to crush a large bulge in the Soviet front lines and take back control of the Eastern Front. In the skies, the Germans had about 2,000 aircraft, while the Soviets had around 2,700, including the tough Ilyushin IL-2 attack planes that could take a lot of damage. Air support played a huge role in this battle, helping both sides on the ground. On the very first day, the fighting in the air was intense. The Germans claimed they shot down 367 Soviet planes in just one day, making it their most successful air combat day of the war. But the Soviets quickly adjusted. One smart tactic they used was called the Circle of Death. In this move, IL-2 planes would fly in a circle to protect each other while still attacking German ground troops. There were also some incredible moments. On July 6, a Soviet pilot named Alexander Gorovets reportedly shot down 9 German planes in a single mission before he was killed in action. Although Germany had some early wins, they couldn't hold on to air superiority. The Soviets kept improving their tactics and defenses, which made things harder for the German Air Force. By the end of July, both sides had taken heavy losses. German aircraft losses were estimated to be between 681 and 1,000 planes, while the Soviets had lost around 1,130. These high numbers showed just how brutal and intense the air battle was. After the battle, it became clear that the German Air Force was stretched too thin. Soviet air strategies had worked well, and the Germans failed to control the skies. This was one of the reasons why they lost the Battle of Kursk, which became a major turning point on the Eastern Front during World War II. Battle of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad started on August 23, 1942, between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The fight centered around the city of Stalingrad in southern Russia. Germany wanted to capture the city to take control of the Volga River and move further toward the oil-rich Caucasus region. The battle began with a massive bombing attack by the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. In just one day, they dropped around 1,000 tons of bombs in about 1,600 flights. The city was almost completely destroyed and an estimated 40,000 civilians were killed. This was the start of a long and deadly air campaign, one of the most destructive in Europe during the war. As German troops pushed into the city, the battle turned into intense street fighting. Then, in November 1942, the Soviets launched a surprise attack called Operation Uranus. They surrounded the German 6th Army, trapping tens of thousands of German soldiers inside the city. To help the trapped troops, the Luftwaffe tried to fly in supplies. They carried out over 4,400 flights and delivered just over 8,300 tons of supplies. But that was far less than the 750 tons needed each day. The mission struggled badly. They lost 488 transport planes and over 1,000 crew members were killed or injured. Both the early bombings and the failed supply mission showed just how important air power was in this battle. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The aircraft failed, and the trapped German army had no choice but to surrender on February 2, 1943. Looking back, military experts say the German Air Force was stretched too thin, while the Soviet Union used its air strategy very effectively. The battle caused massive losses, about 1.1 million Soviet casualties and around 800,000 for the Axis forces. It was one of the bloodiest battles in history and a major turning point on the Eastern Front. Operation Desert Storm. On January 17, 1991, the US and its allies launched Operation Desert Storm, a major air attack against Iraq. The goal was to force Iraqi troops out of Kuwait, which they had invaded a few months earlier in August 1990. The coalition included 35 countries and used over 2,700 aircraft from the US Air Force, Navy, Marines, and other allied forces. Iraq had about 1,100 planes, but many of them were old and not very advanced. The air war began with cruise missiles fired from B-52 bombers and Navy ships, along with stealth bombers like the F-117 Nighthawk hitting important targets. These early attacks damaged Iraq's military communication systems and air defenses, helping the US-led forces gain control of the skies in just a few days. After that, planes like the A-10 Warthog and the AV-8B Harrier were used to directly attack Iraqi tanks and troops. Even though Iraq had a strong air defense system, coalition losses were low. They lost 75 aircraft in total, 52 planes, and 23 helicopters, while Iraq lost around 259 aircraft, including 36 shot down in dogfights. Unfortunately, the air campaign also led to civilian deaths. One of the worst incidents was the bombing of the Al-Amiria shelter in Baghdad on February 13th, where at least 408 civilians were killed. Battle of France. The Battle of France began on May 10, 1940. It was a major fight between Nazi Germany and the Allied forces, mainly France and the United Kingdom. Germany's plan was to take over France quickly using a fast and powerful strategy called Blitzkrieg. This meant combining quick attacks on the ground with strong support from the air. The German Air Force, known as the Luftwaffe, played a huge role. They used about 1,100 planes to bomb enemy targets, destroy Allied air power, and help their ground troops move forward. The real shock came when German forces avoided France's strong defenses, the Maginot Line, by going through the Ardennes forest, an area the Allies didn't expect them to attack from. This surprise move worked. The Luftwaffe controlled the skies, constantly bombing French and British troops, supply routes, and communication systems. The Allied air forces struggled badly. Their planes were older, and their strategies weren't well coordinated. The French lost around 1,274 aircraft, and the British lost about 959. But Germany also paid a price, with the Luftwaffe losing around 1,428 planes. The combined air attacks and ground assaults quickly broke the Allied defense. On June 14th, German troops entered Paris, and just weeks later, on June 22nd, France officially surrendered. After the battle, many experts pointed out that Germany's success came from how well they used their air force alongside their ground troops. On the other hand, the Allies were still using old tactics and couldn't keep up with the speed and power of Germany's new style of warfare. Battle of Midway. On June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway began between the United States and Japan near a small island called Midway in the Pacific Ocean. Japan wanted to destroy the US Navy's aircraft carriers to take control of the Pacific. But the US had already cracked Japan's secret codes, so they knew the attack was coming and got ready in advance. Japan sent 4 powerful aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiru, carrying over 240 planes. The US had 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, which had just been quickly repaired after being damaged earlier. Most of the fighting happened in the air, not on ships, which showed how naval battles had changed. Things took a big turn when the US dive bombers caught the Japanese carriers off guard and sank Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. In response, Hiryu launched an attack that badly damaged the Yorktown, which later sank after being hit by a Japanese submarine. Later, US planes also struck Hiryu, leaving it so damaged that the Japanese had to sink it themselves. By the end of the battle, Japan had lost all 4 of its carriers, a cruiser, around 250 planes, and over 3,000 men. The US lost 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, about 150 planes, and 307 people. After the battle, experts pointed out how important intelligence was in helping the US win. They also said that losing so many skilled Japanese pilots and crew really hurt Japan's ability to keep up in the war. Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War started on October 6, 1973, when Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel. It happened on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, which meant most Israeli soldiers were off duty and the country wasn't ready for war. Egypt and Syria wanted to take back the land they had lost to Israel in the Six-Day War back in 1967. Right from the beginning, air power played a huge role in the fighting on both sides. At first, the Israeli Air Force ran into serious trouble. The Arab countries had strong air defenses, including surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft guns, which made it very risky for the Israeli planes. On October 7th, just 1 day into the war, Israel carried out a mission called Operation Model 5 to destroy Syrian missile sites. But the mission didn't go as planned. The IAF lost several F-4 Phantom jets. Instead of sticking with the same approach, the Israeli Air Force quickly changed its tactics. They started focusing more on helping ground troops and going after enemy airfields in smarter ways. One of the biggest air battles of the war happened on October 14th. It's known as the Air Battle of Mansoura, where Israeli and Egyptian fighter jets clashed in the skies in a long and intense fight. Both sides claimed they had won the battle, and to this day, no one fully agrees on who came out on top. Throughout the war, Israeli pilots flew over 12,000 missions. They supported troops on the ground and got into many air-to-air dogfights. By the time the war ended, Israel had lost around 102 aircraft. On the other hand, Arab air forces were believed to have lost somewhere between 341 and 514 planes.